I'm Ahmed Best, and welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
You must subscribe to the Sarah O'Connell Show
if you know what's good for you.
Ahmed Best, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, Sarah O'Connell Show. I appreciate you having me.
It's a delight to have you on my show today. Now, I want to go back to the beginning of your career, and in fact, before that. So you originally studied percussion at the Manhattan School of Music.
I did. I was a jazz drummer. I still am a jazz drummer. And I like to say that I do everything that I do like I play drums. Right. So it's just a really big part of my life and a part of how I came up. And you know, I hung out with all the jazz cats when I was a teenager, so it was very formative for me.
So what was it you originally wanted to be when you were growing up? Was it a musician? Is that what your dream was?
To be honest, I wanted to be all of it. I was always kind of a polymath. Like I really loved music, I loved science, I loved drama, and you know, in school, you know, as I was coming up, it was encouraged to like do everything. So I did everything. And I honestly didn't want to choose. So what happened with music school was I'd taken a year off after high school and, you know, worked a bunch of weird ass jobs in New York City. And then I realized, like, all right, I really want to formalize this music thing.
And then you were in an acid jazz group and you produced 3 albums during that time as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of in between Manhattan School being over and Stomp. I used to work at this recording studio on the Lower East Side of New York called Context, which was like a recording studio / rehearsal space, and like everybody rehearsed there. Lenny Kravitz would rehearse there. Henry Rollins would rehearse there. It was kind of an East Village staple for like the 90s, right? And this was like way before the East Village became yuppie. But there, while I was working there, I used to be like a receptionist, and I was working at the reception desk, and one of the clients there, who was a recording engineer, was starting a band, and he was like, "Hey man, do you rap?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then he was like, you want to audition for the band?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I did, and it ended up being this acid jazz group called the Jazz Hall. And at the time, like acid jazz was like this really viable genre of music. Like it actually became what is now known as neo soul, right? Which is like the Erykah Badu's and the Jill Scotts, and you know, those are the people who like actually the Roots. Like one of the first gigs that Jazz Hall did was with the Roots. Like when the Roots came up, we were coming up at the same time. They managed to stay a band and we didn't. And they managed to pivot and we didn't. But yeah, acid jazz was a real viable genre at the time. And, you know, the biggest kind of acid jazz guy at the time was this cat named Jamiroquai. I don't know if your audience.
Yeah, in the UK, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So Jamiroquai was kind of the cat. And there was like Galliano and, you know, a bunch of like these bands that we were kind of with. But we had to deal with this record label called Mesa Blue Moon, which was a subsidiary of Atlantic Records. But then we eventually moved on to Big Atlantic because the CEO of Mesa Blue Moon embezzled all of the money from the record label and disappeared. It's like one of those like really salacious music industry stories that I was like in the middle of.
Wow. And then, of course, you got into the phenomenal show Stomp, and you're in it for a decade. What was that experience like? You got to obviously tour around America, but Europe as well. Was each show different? Did you have room to kind of improvise with the instruments on the day as well?
Yeah, I mean, Stomp was really probably like the best time in my life because I got to do all the things in this one place, you know, acting, physical comedy, martial arts, drumming, like everything that I had trained to do in my entire life, Stomp was. And the thing that was so beautiful about Stomp, you know, Stomp is a show that originated in the UK. It's from Brighton.
Yeah, in Brighton, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and the guys who created it, Luke Cresswell and Steve McNicholas, they really, when they brought the show to New York City, it was just like a bunch of British people playing drums on stage. And, you know, we were like street performer kids from New York. And we just ate the show up because they just kind of formalized what we had already been doing individually. And they showed us as young people that you can actually put a structure to what you do and put it on the stage, right? Previously, we were all just kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But Stomp really collected us and focused us in a way that changed all of our lives. You know, it really did, because we got to learn how to be on stage and innovate and be creative all at the same time, every single night, you know, 8 shows a week sometimes. So it was incredibly formative for me as a performer. It was so amazingly generous when it comes to like being able to create and being able to experiment and being able to find yourself. And Luke and Steve just encouraged that so much on their stage that, you know, even to this day I use, even in Star Wars, like I use that same energy to create.
Right. And so you were in the show for a decade. Did the show morph and change over that time? Or if you went to see the show today, would it be the same show you worked on then?
No, it's incredibly different. I mean, the wonderful thing about Stomp is the personalities make the show. So even if you are playing the same music, because it's a different person, it's a different show. So
Yeah,
you really have to play with the people. It's like, you know, it's like being in a band that way. You know, it's like, you know, Tommy Lee would play a different solo than Dave Grohl. So even though it's the same song or the same music, and Stomp is very much like that. It's kind of like rock and roll that way. Regardless of what song you're playing, the personality brings the music. So it's a very different show. There have been new pieces that have come in and out of the show that I don't know. But the thing that remains is that found object, we can make music, communication through rhythm idea. And I think that's universal. And that's why the show still continues. Because the show really is about communication and how we can all learn one language and move together.
It's an incredible show, and I highly recommend everyone watches it, and there's audience participation and stuff like that, and it's a lot of fun. Now, at that time is when you first got noticed, I guess, for the role in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. How did that actually come about, the casting process?
Yeah, you know, it was weird, and I talk about this a lot in my one-man show because it's a very unexpected story. Like what happened was we were doing a show in San Francisco. We were doing Stomp in San Francisco. And one of my castmates had been talking to the woman who casted Episode 1 and Episode 2, Robin Gurland. And she was in San Francisco because Lucasfilm is based in San Francisco, and he had invited her to the show. I, on tour, was usually the lead of the show. Like I led the show and then eventually led it in New York and then in London. But the day Robin came, I didn't know she was in the audience. The day she came, someone who had seniority over me flew up to San Francisco to cover for someone who got sick. And so instead of slotting in the person who got sick's part, he decided to play my part.
Right.
And because he had seniority over me, I had to let him. To which I was very, very upset. Now, I was 22 years old at the time, and I was, to put it really, really nicely, tremendously arrogant.
Right.
So that night, I just completely blasted him out of the water. I made him look like he was a 2-year-old. If he jumped, I jumped higher. If he played anything, I played faster. I mean, it was just a very arrogant 22-year-old response to being upset. At the end of the show, I was upset with myself, right? Because the tenets of Stomp is really about 8 people becoming one, right? It's about unity. And like I said, the message of communication is we all speak the same language. And so we on the stage, we're trying to get the audience to so we're all together, we're all one. It's like this whole unity thing. And I made that show about me. And I was just doing outlandish stuff. So at the end of the night, my castmate walks into my dressing room and he's just like, hey man, I had a friend here and she's casting for Star Wars. And at first I thought I messed up his shot, right? I was just like, oh man, I just completely wrecked that show and now nobody looked at you and now I think I just messed up your shot. And he was just like, no, I'm not actually in the running anymore. He was, but he was like, it's not me, but she wants to talk to you. And so the next thing I know, I'm at Skywalker Ranch auditioning for Star Wars.
It's incredible.
It was weird. It was
and
very
so,
weird.
had you considered doing like acting in films at that point, or was it a complete sort of pivot on your career?
No. That had always been the goal. I mean, my father is a cinematographer. So I had always been around film and you know, I had been on stage for a lot of years. So it was always going to be both, you know, it was always going to be music and acting and then eventually producing, directing, all of that kind of stuff. So I just didn't expect it to be Star Wars. Like I thought I was just going to be grinding on stage for a lot of years, which I was perfectly happy with. You know, I mean, a working New York theater actor used to be kind of an okay profession. You know what I'm saying? Now it's not very lucrative to be. Back in the day, you know, back in the day, it used to be something that you could do. Like that was your profession. But this Star Wars thing just kind of hit me. It just took me off guard. And I was just like, I don't even know what's happening. And then, you know, playing Jar Jar was another level of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it had never been done before in film history. And I was just like, the hardest part about Jar Jar was nobody knew what was going to happen. Yeah.
So how was the character first presented to you? How did they explain it?
You know, they didn't at first. No one was really telling me anything. Throughout the entire audition process, I really didn't know what Jar Jar looked like until I got the part and I was at Leavesden in London and I was doing my first kind of body cast. And then finally I see a picture and I'm just like, oh, but it took it took months. Like I was in this process for months. Even like my screen test at Industrial Lights and Magic with George and all the engineers, they were just testing out the motion capture, right? And at the time, nobody was doing motion capture, so nobody knew what it was. Now you say motion capture, people are just like, oh. But back in the day, it was just like motion capture. What's that? You know?
Literally inventing it in front of you.
Yeah, it was actually being developed. You know, the software was being developed. The methods were being developed. And it was truly this collaboration process. So, and everything, because this was 20 years since Jedi, everything was so incredibly hush-hush. Like nobody was saying anything. And I remember at my screen test, I was like, okay, I pulled one of the animators aside and was like, what, can you just give me like something? Like, can I just, and they were just, nah, just do what George asks you to do. And I was just like, all right, like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if it's wrong. I don't know what. So I just kind of abandoned the idea of knowing anything and just did me, you know, I just did whatever I thought was appropriate at the time.
So were you given guidance on the kind of physicality of Jar Jar Binks, how he moved and also his voice and what that became, or did they sort of leave it up to your interpretation of the character?
Yeah, well, eventually, once we got on set during principal photography, that's when we really started working on Jar Jar, right? And that's when, and it was truly a collaborative process. Like no CGI actor is alone. So you're working with a lot of people you're working with, you know, not only animators and the director, but also technologists and artists. And, you know, I remember one time in post-production during Fandom Menace, I went to ILM to visit, and there was a guy who was at ILM, and he was like, I've been working on your wrist for 3 months. Was not happy about it, right? I was like, sorry, I wish I didn't have such articulate wrists. Yeah. But while we were on set, that's when like we got really specific. Like George got specific about the voice and the movement and the walking. But to also George's credit, what makes him wonderful, in my opinion, is he did give me a lot of room to play. And George is really a fantastic collaborator, in my opinion. And he was with me because it was my first movie, my first major motion picture, right? I'd done like short films and stuff, like student films, but nothing on this scale, you know? And so I was really quite green when it came to the process. And he was incredibly generous and trusting of my abilities. And he was open to all my suggestions. And to be honest, the person who really brought me out of, you know, being self-conscious and trying to be right all the time was Liam Neeson. Like Liam was a wonderful person to stand next to and learn from.
Yeah.
You know, he was absolutely wonderful because he really reinforced this idea that you are an artist, you deserve to be here, this is your job. Don't apologize for having questions and or suggestions. Like, this is your job. And we had such a great time together. I mean, Liam is just a wonderful person to play with. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? He's a great person to be next to. I always thought like me and Liam should have done like a buddy cop flick after Phantom Menace.
I would have watched that.
You know what I'm saying? Like we had such a great time together and we clicked. Like he was one of the dudes. It's such an unknown duo, but like we worked together so well. We just like clicked, like we were like, you know, old friends.
And it really makes all the difference too. If you have that chemistry and camaraderie with someone as well, it just makes going to work that much nicer and the performances and the chemistry better on screen too.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And, you know, our whole cast, Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman, Jake Lloyd, we were actually a really tight cast. And a lot of it was because we were entering this like new world, this new ground. And, you know, Star Wars was different now, you know, and George didn't want it to be like the previous trilogy. He wanted to make something different. He wanted to make something new. He wasn't really leaning on nostalgia. So it was almost like we were doing something that didn't have a precedent, right? It was like this brand new frontier. And me especially, I was on this entirely new like idea for what acting would soon become. And it was quite harrowing because there was a lot of feeling of threat by actors, right? And not our actors, but actors who heard about the process and saw what was coming. They were just like, well, this is going to be the new thing and it's going to take all our jobs away. Yeah. So we were really riding this line of being innovative and interesting, but there was a lot of outside actors looking at this like this was the end of the profession.
Absolutely.
So it was quite challenging, you know.
And really, it was very much the beginning, wasn't it? It was the film that sparked for everything else. I think I remember at the time when the original trilogy came out, I was very young, but there was always talk about doing a prequel series or a sequel series. And I think it was when Jurassic Park came out that they kind of started thinking, okay, we can do this.
Yes.
Technology is getting to the point that we can sort of do the vision of the films.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, George saw Jurassic Park and was like, all right, these dinosaurs look and feel real. It's time now. And George had his entire career, and I've actually kind of modeled my career after this idea of being able to be innovative and push boundaries and regardless of what everyone else says, be able to challenge, right? And have this idea that I am doing this, but I'm also challenging convention. And he was full speed ahead with that. And he changed the landscape of movies. I say about this, about the Phantom Menace all the time. Every film technique up till now, since the beginning of film, is in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
You know, and that movie was 20 years ago.
How long did it take each day to get into the mocap suit and get ready? I know you had like the hat thing on as well.
Yeah.
And what was that process like before filming even started, and how long was each day?
It wasn't really that long. You know, I was in the Jar Jar suit at the time because they didn't know how much could be animated and how much couldn't. Right? So I wasn't in makeup. Makeup usually takes forever. I was just, you know, in a bunch of.
Oh, I know.
Well, you know,
I came ready for this interview 4 days ago. It's terrible.
That I don't believe, Sarah. But for me, it was just like a couple of costumers helping me squeeze into a very tight foam latex suit, and it was just a lot of pull harder, you know. So it took only about 20 minutes. But my time was actually extended because after principal photography, I had to do a lot of the mocap work with ILM and George by ourselves. So after the other actors went away, it was like, all right, now it's animation time. And so I would be shuttled back and forth between ILM and New York for the next 2 years, that stuff, to get the Jar Jar stuff right.
And that was just your wrist.
Yeah, and that was just one wrist. He was just like, I've been working on your wrist for 3 months. It's like, whoa, bro. Sorry.
See, some actors between scenes will ask for the makeup person to come over. You're like, where's my wrist person?
Yeah, where's my wrist guy? Hey, guy with the wrist stuff. Get over here. I did this. You did that.
Can you tell me your favorite scenes to film from the first one? Are they the ones that are the most fun to film on the day, or the ones that when you watch back it, they're your favorite scenes in the movie?
I'll tell you my favorite scene. And if you watch it now, you'll watch it differently.
Okay.
There's a scene where me and Liam and Ewan are in the submarine. Yep. Like right after they go to Autogunga, Boss Nass, we get a ship.
The bigger fish scene, right?
Yes, there's always a bigger fish, right? So I have a line in that scene. You know, Ewan is like, why were you banished? I was banished because I was clumsy. You were clumsy. Yeah, you might say boom the gasser, crashed in the boss's hay blibber, and then banished, right? That's the line. No idea what that line meant. So I would say it a bunch of different times, and we could not do that scene without breaking. I mean, we were just laughing so hard. We were laughing so hard that Liam's Qui-Gon mustache started flying off. So it would be like, we would say these things, and then Ewan would break, Liam would break, and then Qui-Gon mustache would fly off. And it just ridiculous. It was just a ridiculous day, right? And it was just, you know, we're just sitting in the submarine. There are two guys on either side, like poor man's process, like shaking us up and down. And we're just like, oh no, there's a bigger fish, right? But if you watch the scene now and you look at Liam, he's laughing. And
already.
Yes. And he's hiding it. He's trying to hide it. And then between takes, we would do like Star Trek impressions. Like I'd be Captain Kirk and Ewan would be Scotty. And kill Liam. Like Liam would be like, stop, please. We're trying to be serious. And so we had just a blast, like laughing that whole day. And it's my favorite scene because you can actually see us trying to hold back. Well, you see them. I'm actually safe because I'm animated. But you can see them just really trying to hold back laughter. And if you watch the scene again, you'll see them just kind of.
I will, and I'm going to have to petition for them to release all the outtakes in 3D so we can see Liam Neeson's moustache fly towards the camera.
Exactly. Yeah, I would have Liam laughing so hard, he would just be like, please don't. He would just be putting the mustache back on. It was great fun. It was good
And
stuff.
then, and it was obviously quite a physical role as well. Did you get any injuries during filming?
I didn't know that was those were the years where I was just so incredibly limber and lithe that I could do all of that stuff without injury. I couldn't do it now. I'd need 2.5 hours to warm up.
Mm,
But I had just come right off of Stomp. So
right.
I had been in really good shape. And that helped a lot, especially when we were in Tunisia, because in Tunisia, it was like 120 degrees in the shade.
Wow.
You know, there were some days where the thermometers next to the hard drives that were used for Jar Jar, they had to have thermometers there because
Yeah.
after a time, the hard drives would get too hot and they'd actually just be like, well, that one's gone. Other laptop. But some of the thermometers at one time during the day said 150. So
That
it was
must have
super
been
hot.
horrific.
It was
Yeah.
crazy. And I was wearing foam latex, right? Which has
Yeah.
no pores whatsoever. So I lost like a bunch of weight. But I had to be in good physical shape in order to handle that. And I was, surprisingly, you know.
Mm.
Most of the people on the crew started dropping like flies. It was just too hot. I couldn't take it. There was too much sun. You know, fortunately, you know, I was okay.
And so I guess all the scenes outside, they couldn't even film them at nighttime when it was cooler because the lighting would have been all wrong.
Nah, yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be Tatooine, right? And that's where they shot
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker stuff. So they wanted to bring that Tatooine feeling back. And, you know, Tatooine's a desert planet.
It's true.
And
They have nighttime though. You should have suggested it.
You know, if they would have shot nighttime, I would have been a lot cooler. I've been like, just take all these lights and make it a desert. Oh, this is not even leave leaves in. Just bring in some sand and Bob's your uncle. But no, they wanted the real desert.
Instead of the twin sons of Tatooine, they could have done the 15 moons. It would have been spectacular.
Boom, there it is. See, you should be writing this stuff.
I know, right? I'll get working on the next one right now.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I'll plan it almost exclusively at night time, so it's more cooling and refreshing for the cast.
Absolutely.
So by Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Jar Jar had become a politician. When you first started on Phantom Menace, were you given an overall character arc for the trilogy, or did you kind of find out what was going to happen one script at a time?
Yeah, one script at a time is usually how it happens. They are so really afraid of leaks and things getting out that everything is just kept so strictly under wraps. So unfortunately, we don't get character arcs per se, right? There'll be drips and drabs of what happens, and then you get a full script, and then that's what goes down. But yeah, I didn't get the Attack of the Clone script until we landed in Australia.
So how much time did you sort of have to prepare when you get there? Would you just get sort of like daily pages of scripts, or did you have a bit of warning? Yeah,
I mean, you read the whole thing as soon as you land, right? And then every day it changes. Every day it changes. You know, George is really has a very high creative output. So when he reads something, he's just like, that's not working. As I feel, he'll change it. You know, I mean, that's one of the benefits of being both the writer and the director and the producer. You get to do stuff like that. It's not easy for us as actors, but you know, it's kind of what we're trained to do. So as long as the intent is there, the words can change. We're cool.
Now, I must ask you too about a very popular fan theory, Darth Jar Jar.
Yeah, I quite like that theory, actually.
Yeah, so for the uninitiated, the idea goes that Jar Jar Binks was, in fact, a Force user. So when it seemed in the Episode 1 battle, he was being kind of clumsy, but also taking down loads of droids. He was actually doing that on purpose and using, what's the Kung Fu style?
Drunken Monkey, or Drunken Master style, Drunken Kung Fu.
Yeah. And the idea that he had given the powers to Emperor Palpatine on purpose to facilitate the rise of the Emperor and all that kind of stuff. So do you think there's some weight behind that? Could that have been the original plan?
Well, here's what's interesting about the whole Darth Jar Jar series. I was doing a lot of that stuff, and it was really embedded in the movement of it. Like the drunken kung fu style, like I was doing that quite a lot as Jar Jar. And, I grew up a martial artist, and a huge martial arts movie fan. So, Bruce Lee is a big part of my life. Jackie Chan, big part of my life. All the Shaw Brothers movies from the 70s, big part of my life. And Drunken Master and Drunken Master 2 were huge to me. And, I've always loved the way Jackie Chan moved. So a lot of my movies as Jar Jar were inspired by Buster Keaton and Jackie Chan. Those are like the two. So anytime I had the ability to incorporate some of that stuff into what I was doing, especially in that like final battle scene, I would do it, right? Like I said, after Principal, I would do all the Jar Jar stuff at ILM by myself. And that entire final battle scene is me by myself in a space, like doing that kind of stuff. So a lot of what I was doing was influenced by martial arts movements, kung fu movements, Jackie Chan movements, and Buster Keaton. So I see how people picked up on that.
Yeah.
As far as the script and giving Palpatine supreme emergency powers, that's a George question. I really don't. I can't really answer that. Is there a bigger arc when it comes to Jar Jar? There could be. It's not unheard of, but I cannot confirm nor deny. You really have to talk to Mr. Lucas.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look at the original trilogy, a lot of stuff echoes in the prequel and sequel trilogy too. And the first time we see Yoda, he's kind of made out to be this mischievous Muppet that's jumping around and causing chaos, and you don't realise he's Master Yoda. That's kind of his introduction.
That's right.
To do the inverse of that with Jar Jar Binks and then have that same introduction, but then have him be the counterpoint to Yoda, I think would have been really interesting.
So do I. I mean, I think that's wonderful. That's why I really love that idea. I really love that. I say this all the time. I think Star Wars fans are some of the most creative in fandom. And a lot of it is because they know a lot, right? They want to know a lot. And it's something that I do with Jedi Temple Challenge with Keller and Beck. I put out a lot of my own creative ideas and energy into Keller and Beck because I want to collaborate with Star Wars fans. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to have that feedback with them, with these characters and with these stories and these ideas, because I think that's how, these ideas perpetuate and grow. So, who does this well is George R.R. Martin with Game of Thrones. Like, he does this really, really well. He mines the creativity of the Game of Thrones fans, and he's constantly talking to them about, keeping them honest and story and, ideas, and he talks to them. And I think that's very smart to do because nobody does anything that they do alone. And it's really good to have this collective of people who are kind of scholars of what you're doing to help you formulate, new ideas behind it. So the Darth Jar Jar theory I really like because it's so incredibly creative. There's a precedent for it, as you said, with Yoda. And it's a way to continue to tell these stories and keep all of us interested. I think it's extremely positive. So, as I move forward, especially with the idea of Keller and Beck, who I hope will have a larger life in the Star Wars universe, I'm going to continue to be putting out my ideas of who Keller and Beck is. And I'm hoping that I can see more from the fandom about where they want Keller and Beck, who they want to see him with or teaching or training, or what kind of moves they want to see him do. Yeah, I really dig that about the Star Wars fans.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And then is it true that you also choreographed the battle in Star Wars Episode 2 between Yoda and Count Dooku?
Yes, I did. Rob Coleman, who was the lead animator on Star Wars, who was a wonderful human being, a great friend of mine. I read the Yoda fight and I was just like, man, I really want to see this. So one day we're at work and I was just like, hey, Rob, what's that Yoda fight going to look like? And he was like, I have no idea. You know? And I was like, wow, it seems like a big thing. And he was just like, yeah. And he was like, do you have any ideas? And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And Rob had known that I had been a martial artist all my life. And I had also been an anime fan since I was a very young child. So I was like, man, come over to the crib. So he came over to my apartment and we had a movie night. And I just started showing him all of these like Japanese anime shows, series, ideas. And then he was like, really got him into anime, right? And then I was just like, all right, let's write this fight. Let's do it. And then we just started writing together. And we wrote the fight together. I was like, you know, kind of looked at the entire story arc, saw how Yoda would move. And, you know, my big pitch, my huge pitch, which made it into the movie, was Yoda had to hit a stance, right? I was like, you got to give him that, like, moment, that Bruce Lee, like, let's go, Dooku, right? And that was my big pitch. Like, I was like, if that was the only thing that makes it into the movie, success, right? So when in the movie, when Yoda hits the stance, I'm like, yeah, we did it, right? But I knew that was going to be a very definitive part of not only Attack of the Clones, but of Yoda's story. So I was like, this has to slap. Like, this has to hit. So we wrote the fight, and I was like, all right, let's go, man. Let's pitch it. And Rob was like, all right, I got to pitch it to George and Rick McCallum, who was the producer. And so every day I was like, did you pitch it? Did you pitch it? Did you pitch it? And he was like, not yet. I'm trying to find the right time. And then next day, did you pitch the fight? Did you pitch it? He was like, couldn't do it. They're too busy. And I was like, oh, damn it. Right? And then finally he pitched the fight. And I'm like, how'd it go? And he was like, I think we're going to get it. We're going to do it. Right? So he goes away. They do the movie. Opening of Attack of the Clones, right? See Rob. And he's like, I think you're going to be happy when you see the fight. And I was like, word. And then as soon as like, and as soon as Yoda like kind of walks on, I was like, it's our fight. Like, we did it. This was what we scripted, right? And then as soon as he hits his stance, I was just like over the moon. Like, we accomplished it. And that ended up being just one of the high points of like Star Wars in general. I have to give it to Rob Coleman. Like, Rob Coleman was open and generous enough to let me, another actor on the movie, help write that thing. And I can't thank him enough. Like, it was just such an honor. It was just such an honor. I love the guy and I have so much respect for him. It was such an honor to be a collaborator.
Because I have to say, sometimes when you go to watch a movie, even if it isn't the best movie in the world, or maybe it is, sometimes the audience makes the film 100 times better if it's a horror film and everyone's screaming, or a comedy and they're all laughing. I went to the midnight first screening of Attack of the Clones, and the moment you see like the shadow of Yoda walking around the corner, the entire audience erupted, and throughout that entire scene, they went crazy in a way that's still stuck with me. So yeah. I have to say that's kind of my favorite scene from all 9 films, just because that experience in that movie theater that night was amazing.
It was one of those things that as soon as I knew it was coming, I knew it was going to happen, but it still gave me chills. You know, like, because he walks on, and this is one of those things that, you know, those 70s Kung Fu films do really well, right? The way they do old people, right? You have these old people who look slow and aged and worn, and then all of a sudden they move and you're like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, where did that come from? Yeah. And that's what we really captured with that Yoda fight. It was enormous to me. I thought it was wonderful.
And just that last moment where after the fight finishes, he hobbles off again was just perfection.
Right, pop. Yeah, it's perfect. It's really perfect. I love that. That's one of my favorite moments and one of my like most proudest things about Star Wars that I had the pleasure to be a part of, you know. I really appreciated it.
Now, next I want to talk about This Can't Be My Life, which was a web series in
Yeah.
2008. For anyone that hasn't seen that, can you tell us about it and also where we can watch it now?
Yeah, it's up on YouTube right now, and it's on my Vimeo page as well. If you just look for my name or you just type in "This Can't Be My Life." It's one of the first things that I produced and directed in when I moved to Los Angeles, and one of my great friends, Lynn Wachter, who was in Stomp with me, who just has this wonderful comedic voice, and would always tell me these stories about her life, like being a single woman, trying to date and try to find the right guy and all of this stuff. This was like '06, right? 2006 we made this thing. And this was before Black women were seen this way, right? Now it's quite common with Issa Rae and Insecure and she had Awkward Black Girl. But before Awkward Black Girl or before Issa Rae had Insecure, like Black women weren't seen as leads of shows, number one, and they weren't seen as having complex lives. At the time it was just like Sex and the City. So I thought that this was just a great idea because her life and her dating world were so incredibly complex, but hysterical. And so I said to her, I was like, let's write this thing. And we did. And I was just like, all right, I'm going to fund it and direct it because this can't just stay on the page. It was a really good script and it was a really funny script. And every time we read it in a room full of our friends, we were all just like doubled over in laughter. And then the funny thing about it is like Lynn would always say, like, this happened, like this actually happened, like this happened, So we did This Can't Be My Life, and I loved it. Unfortunately, I think we were a little bit ahead of our time, which happens to be my curse in this industry. Because when we went out to try to sell the show, the feedback that we kept getting was no one would buy a show with a Black female lead.
Right.
And thank God Issa Rae came through and changed all that. And now it's something that's not only viable in the industry, but sought after.
Absolutely. And so you've also starred in a ton of other movies and TV shows, Kangaroo Jack 2, Alias, Cougar Town, Law and Order, LA. What were some of your favorites to work on?
A lot of my favorite stuff has been the anime stuff. But to be honest, the things that I really enjoyed are the things that I got to create. I've always considered myself as an actor, kind of just like a working class guy. And I always wanted to be like the character actor that you never could see, but always did a great job, like the Chris Coopers of the world where, they just show up and you're just like, man, that dude is great in everything. Like, what's his name? I always loved that. So, I always kind of modeled myself after this, what I call like a lunch pail actor, like a guy who packs his lunch, goes to work, does a great job, and goes home. But there weren't very many roles for me because there just isn't enough material written for Black men, and even less for Black women. And especially at the time where I moved to Los Angeles, there was like nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like I just could do like guest stars on stuff. And so out of necessity, I created the roles that I wanted to be in.
Right.
And also created the roles that I wanted to see the people who I had such affinity for and knew they had the talent. I wanted to create roles for them because I want to see them, Yes. So I did that. And so a lot of my favorite stuff that I've done has been like the stuff that I created. Like I created this series in the early 2000s called the DL Chronicles, which nobody was talking about, but I executive produced it with two friends of mine who wrote and directed it, Quincy Lanier and DeAndre Gossett, who are now married. But at the time, gay marriage was illegal. And now, because the landscape is so different, their relationship isn't seen as something anomalous. But at the time it was. And so when we did the Download Chronicles, which is a show about Black men who are in the daytime straight and in the nighttime not, they were really handling the situation with nuance. And I wanted to see that. It wasn't this salacious kind of, underworld, like nefarious thing. It was just like, there are circumstances here. And we have to talk about those circumstances. And I was just really proud of the work that we brought onto screen. Same thing with This Can't Be My Life. Same thing with The Nebula, which was like my sci-fi show that I did about an all-Black sci-fi ship being trapped in the Nebula, which is a sci-fi comedy. And every time I tried to take it out to be sold, I would get the same thing back. Like, there is no audience for this, right? Or Black people don't like sci-fi or stuff like that. But I always was just like, you know what? I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I think you're coming from an assumed position. So I'm just going to keep making this stuff. So I had to say, like, that's been my favorite to do.
So you also starred in 2001 Maniacs Filled the Screams, but in addition to that, you also did several songs for the soundtrack?
Yeah, I did. I was playing guitar and singing. With those movies, I always wanted to do just like a low-budget horror film. That was like a goal of mine in my life. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, I'm never going to be able, nobody's going to ever ask me to do a low-budget horror film, And then I got asked to do a low-budget horror film, and I was like, look at this. And, it's one of those things. I've never been like a career strategist. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've never been just like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to pivot to that. And then I've always just kind of gone with what I thought I always wanted to do and what was interesting.
Sure.
And I was just like, you know what? This is like just a legit B horror movie. And it's going to be fun. And I get to play guitar and sing and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So I was just like, fuck it. I don't know if I could do that now. But at the time, it was cool and it was interesting. And it's an experience, for me, life is really about those experiences. And so that was cool. I got to play a zombie and play guitar.
Yeah, it's so great that you did that. And I was listening to the soundtrack earlier on as well. And I thought it's so great because you've done all of these different musical things and you're able to lend that talent to so many different kinds of projects.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it is all about that. What can I do to innovate? What can I do to test myself? What is this that I haven't done before that I could possibly bring to this thing? And just constantly have this challenge to myself, can I do this? And then what is this experience like? It doesn't turn out great a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes it's just like, oops, maybe I shouldn't have did that one. But live and learn, you know what I'm saying? Like, it really is about the experience.
Oh yeah, there's only one way to find out, and that's by doing it, right? I feel like you miss 100% of the opportunities that you don't take. And
that's right.
Everything's either a success or a learning experience anyway, so go for it.
That's right. You win and you learn.
Exactly. So you returned to the character of Jar Jar in Robot Chicken and several episodes of the Clone Wars as well.
Yes.
Was there any apprehension to returning to that character after the prequel trilogy? Did you feel that you'd moved on, or were you excited to return to the character?
No, I mean, yeah, there was apprehension. I think Star Wars is such a big thing. And as artists and as performers, we're not really people who stick to one job for the rest of our lives. I think we have a bit of a wanderlust when it comes to people that we play and the personalities that we inhabit. And so once you do a thing, you're loath to do it again. There's always this idea of a forward moving.
Yeah. Been
there, done that. The sequel cast is going through that right now. I can see everybody's like, would you come by? I saw Boyega, who I'm such a huge fan of, and Oscar Isaac. So I'm just an enormous fan of the two of them. of all the sequel cast. I'm just a big fan of all of them. But Boyega, I've had the pleasure of talking to and chilling with. But I saw on his Twitter, like, you know, people were like, would you come back and be Finn again? And he's like, nah. And I'm like, I did it. And for some reason, people take offense at that. But that's every actor. You know, once you've done a role, you're kind of loath to do it again. Especially on film. Like, it lives on film. It's there. It's a time in your life. It's like, you know, people asking you, hey, you want to go back to high school? You're like, nah. You know what I'm saying? Like, every person, exactly. You ask somebody, hey man, you want to go back to high school? Let's go do high school again. People are just like, no. That's kind of what it's like.
I do think I'd be better at it the second time.
I'd be better at it now. Yeah. You know, that I'm in my 40s. Hey, do high school again in your 40s. Absolutely. Leave teenager to the real world. But yeah, like, people get offended at that. But honestly, as artists, it's what we do. You know, we move on. So playing Jar Jar again you know, there was a little bit of apprehension, especially since the backlash. And, you know, I didn't really know how I was going to be perceived. And a lot of times when I'm asked, it's to ridicule, you know, and not to celebrate. And I don't like taking part in that.
Yeah.
You know, Jar Jar is a pioneering, history-changing role.
For real, yeah, for lots of reasons.
And is only being respected as such recently.
Yeah.
So I did Robot Chicken because Seth Green is a very close friend, and I trust him, and I appreciate him, and I love the show. Like, I really love Robot Chicken. And then Clone Wars I loved because, you know, Dave Filoni and I really liked continuing that in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, you know, like that storytelling. And Filoni has such a wonderful take on George's ideas, and he's another artist that I really trust. So at first I didn't do Clone Wars and asked, but it was the fandom who I thought didn't want to see any more Jar Jar who asked, like, why isn't Ahmed doing Jar Jar? And so Lucasfilm called me and they were just like, look, we really want you back. I was like, all right, send me the script, I'll read it. And then I ended up really enjoying it and really getting to know Filoni and really appreciating him, you know, as a creator and a director and someone who is keeping the vision of Star Wars alive and in a really positive place.
So I've got to say, I've always been Team Jar Jar. I loved the character when he first debuted. I thought it was a lot of fun and a really sort of empathetic character. And, you know, he was kind to all the characters he met, and he helped advance the story, and he was entertaining. And even scenes like the pod race scene, you know, when he got his tongue zapped and stuff like that, was fun. And it was kind of heartbreaking at the time when all the backlash happened. I think it was at the beginning of when the internet was kind of just invented too, and people hadn't worked out how to be humans yet on it, and they were just, you know, hiding behind keyboards being awful. So it's so horrible that you went through all of that. But I must say, I loved the character, I loved your performance in it, and I'm pleased and grateful that there's a kind of resurgence for the character now, and new generations are getting to experience it on Disney Plus and all that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm glad that there's a new batch of Star Wars fans that really see Jar Jar's place in the universe of Star Wars. So yeah, it's very positive now.
And I have to ask you, there's an Obi-Wan Kenobi series in the works at the moment for Disney Plus. Is there any chance Jar Jar might appear in that?
You know, I don't know. I really don't know. I gotta text Ewan McGregor and ask him. Yeah, I don't know.
Say the Sarah O'Connell show needs to know.
I'm gonna text Ewan McGregor right now and say, hey man, been a while since I've seen you. I know we can't really see each other right now, but Sarah O'Connell would like to see Jar Jar and Kenobi. So make it happen, Captain. Do it. Get it done.
Exactly. And we need the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn back so you can have your cop movie thing happening in the series.
Buddy cop, Jar Jar and Qui-Gon taking on the Empire.
Ghost
one
Cop.
stickboard at a time.
I would watch that. You mentioned earlier you have a one-man show that you've been developing. What can you tell us about that? Obviously, things are difficult at the moment with coronavirus, but what can we expect from the show? When might we see it?
You know, I was supposed to be in Edinburgh to do the festival this year, doing it. And all of a sudden, the world decided to do something different. So, unfortunately, I'm not in Edinburgh this year. I'm hoping to be in Edinburgh next year doing it. So, I'm like really pushing. Hopefully the people who are going to host me in Edinburgh this year will do it for next year, and hopefully there will be a way to do it next year that'll keep everybody safe. But it really is about the time between 1997 and 1999 when I got the role of Jar Jar doing the movie, and then what happened after with the backlash and how it affected me personally.
Right.
And it was incredibly difficult to write, incredibly emotional to think about those times, because it was very tough times back then for me emotionally, and incredibly cathartic to get out on paper. And I've always wanted to do a one-person show. You know, for me, growing up, Whoopi Goldberg was gold standard, you know. Yeah. And I remember her show on Broadway, and that was it for me. I saw Whoopi Goldberg do that. And that was the first time I saw anybody that looked like me do something like that. I didn't know Black people could do that at that scale. You know what I'm saying? So Whoopi Goldberg really broke ground. And then as I got older, you know, John Leguizamo was the cat, right? And, you know, I like Legs because he was from New York. And so I was just like, I want to do that one day. You know, I want to just be me by myself on stage telling a story. And then I didn't have a story. And then, you know, for years and years and years, I was avoiding the Jar Jar kind of talk, just out of protecting myself, you know, and protecting my heart.
Sure.
And honestly, I didn't think people really cared about what happened to me. I think people really just look at what happened as, oh, you know, big deal. People didn't like your part. There are bigger problems on the earth than, you know, somebody not liking your role. And I agreed with them. I was like, I think there are bigger problems on the earth than somebody not liking my role, regardless of what it did to me. But that type of thinking also contributed to my detriment, you know? So I finally was just like, maybe it's kind of time to talk about this. So I started the process last year, and it didn't really become real. I did a reading in New York City, November last year, and I had to do it in New York because my people who I invited from New York would have given me like straight up honesty. Right. They would have been like, you know what, Ahmed, this sucks. Don't do it. You know what I'm saying? And if they said that, I would have been like, it would have been fun. Not going to do it. But I got exactly the opposite response. The response I got was, you have to do it, and you have to do it now. And that's when the whole Edinburgh thing started. But I'm really excited about it. I really am terrified by it. And I want to get it on stage. I'm going to see what I can do to debut it at Edinburgh next year.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck with it, and all things going to plan. I'd love to go and see the show in Edinburgh at the festival as well, and we'll tell everyone else too. I think it's an important story as well, and I think people forget when they're watching TV, or even if they message someone who's a celebrity online, they may think they're doing that in isolation, but you have to imagine you're getting thousands of them every single day, and you put your heart and your soul into a character, and regardless of something is good or bad, I love the character, but no one sets out to do a bad TV show or film. And also the entire production is kind of the responsibility too of the people that write it and film it, and the entire cast and crew, and it's not just about one person anyway. And to bombard someone's actual real life with hatred for a computer generated character, I think is horrific, and nobody should ever do that.
Yeah, and you know, I was watching this interview this morning actually with Richard Burton, and he was always talking about how he never saw his films and he never read his reviews, right? And the thing about Star Wars is it's so culturally ingrained that you can't get away from it.
Right.
So wherever I went, I couldn't get away from it. It was just constantly at me. And as hard as I tried not to read anything or not to be influenced by anything, it was everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. So, I talk about that. I talk about how, when you become part of a culture and the culture gets to decide who you are, without even having to talk to you, how you deal with that. And it was also, the first time cyberbullying really happened in a huge way. And online intimidation, that was, I was at the forefront of that. It hadn't really been that much of a cultural phenomenon until Phantom Menace came out. So, I talk about all of that and how that even mirrors what's happening now in social media.
And hopefully I'll get people to think more and also encourage more people to speak up about the experiences when they have them, so that they don't suffer in silence and have to get through it themselves. And hopefully social media platforms can be more supportive of people when they're facing bombardments of harassment like that.
Yeah, that's my big goal. I mean, my overarching thing about the one-man show is to help people recognize that they're not alone, no matter how alone you feel. I didn't tell anybody any of this, not even the people I was in very close relationships with. They had no idea until they saw the reading of my one-man show. Like, it's been 20 years. I haven't told this story in 20 years. So, and I get a big, like, how come you didn't say anything? I was like, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say. But say something is the big thing, because you're not alone. And there are people who have your back and want to be with you and encourage you.
I completely agree. And I want to talk to you too about a music video you directed for a band called The Levels. And I love
Levels Band.
I love the music video. Can you tell me how that came about and if you'd like to do more of it? It starts off on the beach.
Yeah. My friend Keith Middleton, who's the lead guy in the video and who is one of the originators of Levels Band, he was a stomper. He and I started Stomp together in 1995. And we had kind of parallel lives because we lived like a couple blocks away from each other in Brooklyn. He had a rap group. I had a rap group. And we would do Stomp and both like have gigs after Stomp where he would be playing with his rap group and I'd be playing with mine. So we would always, we were like brothers. We became so very tight. And when he started this Levels Band, which is a very international band, he was like, yo, Ahmed, I got this song I want you to do a video to. And I was like, oh yeah? And he played me the song and I was just like, yeah, let me see what I can come up with. And he was like, we ain't got no money, so.
Always the way, right?
He's like, yeah, man. I was like, yeah, all right, dope, I'll do your video. He's like, yeah, man, there's no money, so whatever you could do on a literal shoestring. So I was just like, all right. And we put that thing together, and I the song really is about us, and finding somebody, finding your soulmate, losing them, and then finding them again. And so I really wanted to find a way to do that in a way that was creative. And there was this beach in Los Angeles that I thought would be a really great location for the whole thing. And it's just me and a camera guy figuring it out, and it turned into something really quite nice.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous looking video, and I really do recommend that people seek it out and watch it, and hopefully you'll get to do a lot more stuff like that too.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. I've been doing a lot of directing lately, and music videos was a big deal back in the 90s. Like, you have a career doing music videos. It's not as easy now. Yeah. But I like the challenge of being able to take this song and create a visual representation of what the song means.
Now, you've recently returned to Star Wars again, as you mentioned earlier, with Jedi Temple Challenge, and you play Kelleran Beck. Can you tell people uninitiated about the show and where they can find it as well?
Yes. So Kelleran Beck, the Sabered Hand, is a teacher at the Jedi Temple. And what I as Keller and Beck do is I put young Padawans who are ready for their lightsabers through their trials. So they have 3 trials: a strength trial, which is physical, a memory trial, an intellect trial where they have to remember a story and answer questions, and then the Jedi Temple trial, which is like all of the above. And it is a really fun show. It's for Padawans of all ages, even though the contestants are between 10 and 14. And it's on Star Wars Kids on YouTube, or it's on Star Wars Kids on the Star Wars website where you can find it. It is not behind the Disney Plus paywall, so you can watch it anywhere, at any time, and you don't need a D Plus subscription, which I really like because the show can really be global.
Yeah.
You know, and it's accessible. But I love my castmate, Mary Holland, who plays 83, the droid, the protocol droid. She is an incredible talent, and we had so much fun doing the show. It's fairly funny and really fun. And I love all the contestants, like the kids, you really start rooting for them. So, you know, and I'm excited to give more of Keller and Beck to Star Wars fans. There's some really good ideas, I think, that are going to be coming.
Right. I must say, I love the production values of the show as well, because you kind of imagine a web series might just be on a green screen or something, but there's proper set design stuff going on. And it definitely looks like it's part of the universe, and a lot of love and attention's clearly gone into the series, which is great. Yeah,
it feels like Star Wars. That's one of the things that I really love about it. You know, when you walk on a Star Wars set, it's very specific, and it feels like it when you walk on.
Have you ever considered writing a book? Because I would love you to write one, and I'd love to read it.
You know what's funny? Frank Oz said that to me. I was talking to Frank. Frank was helping me with my one-man show. And, you know, I would just send him stuff and send him pages. And he was like, this is a book. You should write a book. And I was like, oof. I don't know. I've never written a book before. But yes, I am kind of in the beginnings of writing a book about this stuff.
Amazing.
So I don't know how long that's going to take. I've never written a book before, but yeah, it's definitely in the works.
It's very exciting. So I can imagine the audio book would be amazing with you narrating it as well. Be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of which, can you tell me a fun fact about you? Something people may not know, a party trick, a hobby, anything like that?
Fun fact about me. I am a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's a fun fact. I think people knew that. I speak French. That's a fun fact. I have an incredibly green thumb. I'm very, very good at gardening. And I'm an avid gardener. I love gardening. I love it quite a lot. If anybody wants to share their gardening or their plants or their pictures, please do. I'm super into it.
Finally, have you got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell Show and your fans around the world?
Yeah, my biggest message is please stay tuned to a lot of what's coming next. I am going to be meeting all of you. And I'll be engaged with all of you because I really appreciate and respect the talent, the ideas, and the acumen of everyone in the fandom. And just be kind to each other.
It's very good advice. Actually, while I'm on the subject too, so you've got the show coming up, you're in the early stages of writing a book that I'm very much looking forward to reading. You need to text Ewan McGregor to let him know that I need you to be in the Disney Plus show. Have you got anything else in the pipeline?
Anything else in the pipeline right now? Nothing that I can talk about. But yeah, there's some stuff coming up.
Very exciting. Well, Ahmed, Best, thank you so much for your time. You're an absolute legend, and I love all of the creative stuff you've worked on and being able to celebrate your career to date with you today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate you as well.
And thank you to everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up, and leave lots of lovely comments. We'll see you all again soon for another episode of the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Everybody, this is Ahmed Best. You must subscribe to the Sarah O'Connell Show if you know what's good for you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, that was fantastic, Sarah. Thank you so much. That was an excellent interview. Appreciate it. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely.